All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. A lot going on today. The news does not stop, despite the fact that we're just one day beyond Christmas Day. This is December 26, 2024. New Year's next week, obviously. Listen to what's in the news because, again, the news simply doesn't seem to stop. The left never stops. Marxist never stops. This was posted in The Hill today, a column that reads, Congress has the power to block Trump from taking office, but lawmakers must act now. So this is I guess this would be an attempt at a soft coup, an insurrection of sorts to make sure that Trump never takes office. And the left is totally serious about it. There's also news that the left is just openly admitting that they are trying to kind of box Trump in before he gets into office. On top of that, I'll bring that to you. That story was posted on Breitbart. Also, Biden signs 50 bills into law on Christmas Eve. Let's talk about that. Biden's prisoners of conscience. We'll talk about that, the 37 commutations and what that's really about. And more importantly, I think a story that I talked about earlier this morning on Dennis Prager, at least a column, what's happening at Indiana University, where they're requiring students to detail how their privilege caused oppression over subordinate groups. So let's get started on this. And I'm going to tie all of these stories in together because what the left is trying to do is they're trying to undermine the church. They're trying to undermine the Electoral College. And I'm going to try to tie all these in together to prove that fact to you. First, let's start here. I just read this column earlier, right before I came on to record the podcast. This hat tip Breitbart. Biden is trying to box Donald Trump in to prevent damage he'll do. All right. So former Bush Cheney political strategist Matthew Dowd said on MSNBC today that President Joe Biden was trying to box President-elect Donald Trump in with his last official acts as president. Now, we know that it's actually Biden's staff because Biden doesn't know what the flip he's doing at this point. We all read the Wall Street Journal report last week that reported that Joe Biden has been out of his mind since at least April of 2021. And for those of us with a modicum of common sense and eyeballs that actually work, even while he was running for the White House back in 2020, we all saw that he was in the beginning stages of dementia or he was senile at best. All right. But now the left is plain out admitting what we've been saying all along. So the guest host, Richard Liu, said, Matthew, and I'm quoting, it's been a busy week for the president. We're talking of the commutations that came at the end of last week, but we had many bills signed by the president. There's also the issue of more judges, close quote. And then he goes on. He asks, what do you expect to see him do in the next 3 weeks of lasting effect? Dowd said, I think what he's trying to do is trying to corner Donald Trump and sort of box him in so he can do, I think the Biden administration and the president is trying to prevent Donald Trump from doing as much damage as he possibly could do, which he could do a lot after becoming president. But I think Joe Biden is trying to box him in on this, speaking specifically to the communications, which, of course, Donald Trump doesn't understand the difference between a commutation and a pardon. These people are such idiots and they're so condescending. They think they're smarter than everyone else. Donald Trump just won the election and he won it in a landslide. And he won it because not only was Kamala Harris a bad candidate, but Kamala Harris represented Biden's bad policies. Dowd goes on to say it comes from the president's Christianity and outlook on the world. I will tell you, me personally, as a Christian, I'm opposed to the death penalty. Donald Trump, it's amazing. He's weighing in on this issue in such a way on Christmas. He might as well have quoted Scrooge from Dickens and said, bah humbug. See, this is part of the problem. This is why you don't water down Christianity. Listen, if you screw up as a Christian, you screw up. You admit it. You admit that you sin and you repent. Everybody knows that Joe Biden isn't a Christian. He's not a devout Catholic by any stretch of the imagination. The guy is for he's pro-abortion. It's not just pro-choice. The guy is pro-abortion. Not only that, the guy used his crackhead son to enrich himself. The guy molested his daughter apparently in the shower, which she wrote about in a diary. The guy is far from being any sort of Christian, and he's one of the most corrupt people that we've seen in Washington, D.C. Dowd went on or added, I think Joe Biden is trying to box Donald Trump in as much as he can. And there's no doubt about it that they're trying to do that. Let me share with you 50 bills that were signed into law. Obviously, I'm not going to go through all of them. but I'll outline a few of them like I did earlier on Prager Show. By the way, if you're listening to this podcast, would you please give me a like? Would you please give me a follow on YouTube and Rumble? All things, if you're are searching for the Carl Jackson Show podcast, just search for the Carl Jackson Show wherever you go to get your podcast. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, whatever it is you do. Make sure that you do that, but please follow us. We would certainly appreciate that. All things social media, X, Instagram, and Facebook primarily. I try to do my best to answer as many people as possible. Unless you're nasty, then I don't want to deal with you. but for the most part, if you're just being inquisitive or cool, listen, man, I try to answer as many people as I can. I can't get to everybody, but I do appreciate you sounding off on social media. All right, so that's one thing. So now they're admitting that they tried to box Trump in. And then you got this Hill report from two attorneys that are just straight up saying, hey, listen, this is a way we can prevent Trump from becoming the president of the United States. Now, it isn't going to happen. Republicans are already sounding off on this. I'll give you some of the quotes from some of the lawmakers, but Daily Wire had a piece that just basically gave a synopsis of what the Hill was talking about. And they title it, Congress Sounds Off on Op-Ed About Blocking Trump from Becoming Trump from the presidency. Excuse me. So on Thursday, several lawmakers expressed their condemnation of an op-ed in the Hill that urged members of Congress to try and block President-elect Donald Trump from taking office for his second term. Democrat-linked lawyers Evan Davis and David Schulte claimed there was, quote unquote, overwhelming evidence of Trump engaging in an insurrection that disqualifies him from the presidency, and if both chambers spurn Trump's from electoral college votes. Vice President Kamala Harris, they say, who lost to Trump in 2024 in the 2024 contest, could be elected instead. Listen, that so much chaos would ensue if, God forbid, they were stupid enough to do that. And frankly, they're not going to do that. But these people are desperate. They're just showing you who they are. They don't believe in the Constitution. They never have. They don't believe in the rule of law, given the commutations that Biden's staff is making and getting him to sign as an old man. I mean, it's just straight up elderly abuse, what's going on. Not to mention that you have Republicans that control the House, that will continue to control the House. You have the Senate being handed over to the Republican Party. So by the time Trump's inauguration day comes, you will already have a Republican Senate in place. So this is just foolhardy, but the left is letting you know where they are. The people from Libs of TikTok said, and I quote, sounds like Democrats and the media are planning an insurrection. And then you had Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah. He said they use the word insurrection only when talking about Republicans, obviously being sarcastic as only Mike Lee can. And again, the column in the Hill is Congress has the power to block Trump from taking office, but lawmakers must act now. And I simply do not believe it's going to happen. I don't believe they're that cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And quite frankly, if we're being honest, and if Democrats were honest, I think they're ready to get past or move past Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Joe Biden took his last, I want to say his last vacation a day, but I don't even know if that's true. I think he and what's her name? Dr. Jill, trying to live it up as much as they possibly can on the taxpayer dime while they're still in the White House. Here's what Representative Nancy Mace had to say. She said, the left has always been the real threat to democracy. Now they're finally admitting it out loud. There's no fair and impartial process in the left's America. She couldn't be more right. And then more Republicans sounded off as well. You had Mike Collins from Georgia. Never tell me that they haven't tried to steal the election. He says this will not happen. He is getting confirmed. Said Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida. And then Chip Roy from Texas says this is insane and it's not a thing. And even one Democrat, Representative Richie Torres, sounded off with a disapproving post by saying, if you only believe in democracy when it produces the results you like, then you do not truly believe in democracy. And again, I really do believe the left wants to move on from this Biden era. It's been a complete and utter disaster. I do think there are some people that are fearful that justice might come their way, as should be the case, in my opinion. But nonetheless, These people, they don't believe in the rule of law. They don't believe in the Constitution. They want to fundamentally transform America. These people have been indoctrinated in college, on college campuses and universities, even as low as elementary schools. Now, got a caller in on a Dennis Prager show earlier today that mentioned just that. In La Cañada, California, where in elementary school they were teaching the kids about DEI and CRT and all this crap, trying to brainwash these young kids. It's a sad state of affairs. So this was in the Epic Times, or reported in the Epic Times earlier today, and I just want to go through it real quick. So here's the headline, hat tip. Again, Epic Times: Biden signs 50 bills into law on Christmas Eve. So here's the summary. Joe Biden, on his last Christmas Eve in the Oval Office, signed 50 bills into law. This includes measures that make the bald eagle the country's official bird, which I did not know it wasn't. Precludes members of Congress from collecting pensions if convicted of crimes, establishes the first federal anti-hazing college campus standard, and restrains federal agencies from issuing useless reports. I have an issue with at least a couple of these, and these are just four that are outlined in this column. Biden signed 50 bills after his staff got them together for him. And frankly, I shouldn't say that because some of these bills have probably been sitting on his desk or Chuck U. Schumer's desk for quite some time. Some of these bills were co-sponsored or authored by Republicans over a year and a half ago, and Biden is just signing them now. So you have to ask yourself, you mean to tell me Biden had all this opportunity to sign these bills into law that were bipartisan bills for the most part? I don't always like that, but in some cases, it's a good thing. So he had the opportunity to do this, and he didn't do it. And now his last, month in office, all of a sudden, they want to sign all these bills to try to secure his legacy because his approval rating absolutely sucks. He's been a disgrace. And I guess his last hurrah is screw the Democrat Party, but I'm also going to screw Trump because you guys should have ran me. Because this is what I would have done to Trump, or something to that effect. The guy is absolutely, his family, from Jill Biden, Hunter Biden, every single one of them are a bunch of narcissists. I can't wait till they leave the White House. And man, God have mercy on them because they're doing their best. They're not sabotaging Trump. They're sabotaging you. We voted resoundingly. We can't stand the Bidens. We can't stand their policies. We can't stand Kamala Harris. We can't stand her policies. And her policies would have been worse than Biden. She's worse than a dementia patient, and everyone knows it. That's why the chick does not have a chance. Even the Teamsters union boss, which I'm no fan of, frankly, what's his name, Sean Davis or whatever his name is, came out and said that while she was still she wasn't the nominee yet, Biden was still running at this point, but basically she came to him and said, you union members need to get in line. I mean, it's as simple as that. She was very cocky, condescending. She was very, nasty or whatever. And so he got a little bit of a taste of Kamala Harris, but that backfired on him because she expected them to get in line. So getting back to some of these bills again, Biden signed into law. He designated the bald eagle as the national bird, clearing up what has been assumed but not codified for nearly 250 years, which is absolutely crazy to me. I had no idea that this was the case. Absolutely silly, if we're being honest. So it notes that on June 20th, 1782, the bald eagle was adopted as the coat of arms for the U.S. Great Seal, but there was never any formal language encoded to designate it as the national bird. How silly. That's just crazy. Another bill that was signed into law was the Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act. Now, I might get in trouble for saying this. I want to stop all child abuse, especially the children that are probably being used for sex labor and slave labor right now, thanks to Joe Biden and Alejandro Mayorkas, who, in my opinion, should be in jail because they let over 300,000 children disappear into the United States. We have no idea where these children are. We can only hope and pray that Tom Homan and President Trump will be able to rescue as many of those children as possible and pray for them because we all know they are experiencing nightmares beyond their belief as we sit here. Absolutely disgusting. But this Stop Institutional Child Abuse Act creates a federal work group on youth residential programs to oversee the health, safety, care, treatment, and placement of minors in rehab and other programs. And of course, we have an administration that again lost over 300,000 illegal immigrant children that are in in this country. Do you really think the federal government is going to do some fantastic job of protecting children from child abuse? It all sounds great in theory, but here's the bottom line. I believe that things will get worse, but the bill was notable for the personal involvement of socialite and activist Paris Hilton, who apparently was abused in one of these youth treatment centers. Her parents didn't know about it, she said, but she was strangled and choked at one point by apparently some of the people working there. But here's my issue. I don't believe this needs to be a federal issue. I don't think the federal government needs to be involved. The people that are best suited to handle child abuse in a particular state or area are going to be state officials, local officials, parents, churches. Those are the people that are going to handle this the best. And no one in DC, especially the incompetent people that you have there now, are going to be able to do anything about stopping child abuse. It sounds great in theory, but this needs to happen at a local level. That's where it's going to be handled best. Especially when you have Joe Biden that loves sniffing little girls' hair. Like, give me a break. Another bill, Stop Campus Hazing Act. Now, I totally agree with this, but I don't think it should be done from the federal government. So you're going to stop campus hazing. This was co-filed by both a Democrat and a Republican. Democrat Lucy McBath from Georgia, Jeff Duncan from South Carolina, the Republican. It also had 57 co-sponsors. And the act was spurred by a North Carolina State University report that hazing is rampant on many college campuses, requires federally funded higher education institutes to disclose hazing incidents reported to campus or local police authorities. No, actually, what needs to happen on college campuses, we need to get federal funding out of college campuses. Let the states handle those colleges and universities and make sure the local police, the campus police, state police, or if necessary, are making sure that this doesn't happen. And these institutions should have anti-hazing, whatever rules on their books, and expel anybody that participates in a sorority or fraternity of hazing. Just expel them. All right, here's another thing. President Biden signed Senate Bill 932, the No Corruption Act, that was co-sponsored by Senators Jackie Rosen from Nevada, Rick Scott from Florida, that's our Rick Scott, and Josh Hawley from Missouri, the No Corruption Act, as it's called. I think this kind of does something. I'll explain in just a second. But this act supposedly disqualifies a member of Congress, quote, convicted of crimes related to public corruption, close quote, from receiving their retirement payments. And the reason they did this is because of Senator Bob Menendez. But I also think the reason why Biden signed it into law, because remember, the left never stops advancing their agenda. I think it's a way to say, listen, we're not corrupt, but the incoming administration probably is. Remember, the left is always working on a narrative. They never sleep. They never stop. The last bill that I'll discuss anyway for this podcast, Eliminate Useless Reports Act, that seeks to streamline federal reporting processes by requiring federal agencies to file a list of outdated or duplicative plans or reports in their annual budget justifications. The bill was introduced. Well, we need to make sure that we eliminate useless jobs and useless regulation too. But the bill was introduced in 2023 by Representative Robert Garcia, a Democrat from California, with support from co-sponsors Representatives Glenn Grothman, a Republican from Wisconsin, and Chuck Edwards, a Republican from North Carolina. So Biden is only signing this stuff now. This was introduced back in 2023. I mean, a year ago, just over a year ago now. Look at all the things. Sean McConnell mentioned this earlier today when I was in for Praker. Look at all the things the left is, everything we've been saying they've been doing, and they've been calling us liars and saying we're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and gaslighting us, Karine Jean-Pierre and the rest of them. They're coming out and admitting everything. So all of you that may be Democrat, that may have been Democrat, that may have been moderate, but you've elected to vote for Trump this time around, your vote was justified. The leftists now admitting that they lied to you, including with the Wall Street Journal report admitting that Biden has been incapable of running that White House at least since April of 2021, meaning his very first days in office, his first months in office. I mean, just absolutely insane what's going on. All right, I want to bring your attention to another story real quickly here, but I think this is very important. And I think this is probably, of all the things, I think this is something that we need to be concerned about the most as conservatives. And this is the indoctrination that is going on in our schools, particularly in our college campuses. I want to bring your attention to something that's happening at Indiana University. Indiana University is requiring students to detail how their privilege caused oppression, over subordinate groups. All right, so this is absolutely insane in the membrane. I do want to do this because I want you to understand that what you're dealing with in the Democrat Party, they talk about the left being a cult, but really what we're dealing with is a cult from the Democrat Party. I want you to, Gabe, if you hear me, I want you to get video clip number 7 together. This is Lindy Lee. Lindy Lee is a top Democrat fundraiser. You've seen her lately all over Fox News. She was one of the first, if not the first, fundraiser to come out and sound off against Kamala Harris's campaign after the loss because she was totally baffled. She said that she was being told by people in Kamala's campaign and other staffers, I believe, in the White House, that Kamala had the race was neck and neck. So this lady, Lindy Lee, is making a buttload of money, but she's raising a buttload of money, bringing in millions and millions and millions of dollars from donors. And Kamala Harris, ends up wasting about $2.5 billion in a span of just 3 months and has absolutely nothing to show for it. And now the left is treating Lindy Lee like she's the spawn of Satan rather than asking Kamala Harris, what the heck did you do with all of this money? But here she is, Lindy Lee, video clip number 7, please, Gabe.
Ashley, Merry Christmas. It's wonderful to be with you.
Merry Christmas.
This has been a long time coming. My initial disillusionment became clear when I realized that essentially set $2.5 billion on fire. They raised $1.5 billion through the campaign, another billion through the super PAC Future Forward. And there's been no accountability. We still haven't gotten any answers as to why Oprah, a billionaire, got $2.5 million through her production company. Why couldn't she pay for it? She's an oligarch. She could have just paid for the production costs herself. And not to mention the fact that they spent $450,000 putting Kamala Harris's face on the sphere. Now tell me why that would be helpful. Tell me how that would help her win. Obviously, that was utter failure. And then they spent $500,000 essentially bribing Al Sharpton moments before he interviewed her. And this is our hard-earned money. This is the money that I worked so hard to raise. I raised millions of this, and donors are feeling burned. And let me tell you, although I might be the only one coming forward, I haven't met a single donor who disagrees with me.
So what's been the response, Lindy, since you made your announcement?
Vitriolic. And they say they're not a cult, but look at how they behave when one of their own dares to think for herself. The excommunication, the defamation, the public shaming, the boycott campaigns, the psychological terrorism. I no longer have comments on any of my social media, because it's just too much. I don't need that. It's just endless. And as soon as you step out of line, they will get you.
Yeah, that is clear. So what's next? Are you going to turn Republican, independent? What's next for you?
This all has been so fast for me, and actually someone scooped my own exit. Some random person on Twitter got 3 million views saying that Lindy Lee is going to exit. I couldn't even own my own departure. So this is all happening really quickly for me, but you might see me at the inauguration. I don't want to say too much right now, but somebody on Team Trump already reached out to me. They've been incredibly gracious, and on day one, they were kinder to me and more humane than the DNC ever was.
Wow.
And I just think that speaks volumes, yeah.
Wow. It's a cult. I mean, it's a cult. See, the Democrat Party, I mean, they don't believe in the God of the Bible. Yeah, at least their leadership, they don't believe in the God of the Bible. At least they don't act like it. They believe they are gods, and to some extent. I mean, this is why I tell you, America is a Christian nation. It's based in Judeo-Christian values. Without the God of the Bible, there is no objective truth. Everything is just mere opinion. Who's to say, as I shared before, that Charles Manson? How do you know if Charles Manson is evil? How do you know? The only way you can know is by following the commandments of the Bible. That's it. That's the only way that you know. Well, I'm an atheist and I'm an agnostic. And I'm smart. So what? You can be smart. You can have common sense, but you don't have the moral authority to judge right and wrong unless there's a higher authority telling you what right and wrong is, and that is the God of the Bible. So I want to take you to the story from the Washington Free Beacon, where I want you to understand that it isn't just true, although it is true, that Democrats are recruiting and indoctrinating college students from these colleges and universities. But I want you to understand what they're up to. And I believe there's a strategy at foot. Hat tip Washington Free Beacon, Indiana University, requires students to detail how their privilege caused oppression over subordinate groups. Okay. So here's the summary. An Indiana University class requires students to determine their, quote, privilege, close quote, and dominant, quote unquote, identities, like, guess what they are, being white or male, so that they could, quote, address issues of oppression. A mandatory exercise was part of a course that fulfills the school's social and historical studies. Students were instructed to write an, quote, in-depth reflection of two parts of their identity, one subordinate identity and one dominant identity. All right, the final assignment for the 8-week course were 26% of the final grade. So again, students were required to write an in-depth reflection of two parts of their own identity, one subordinate identity and one dominant identity. This was worth 26 percentage points of their final grade. It assumes that each student has at least one identity group that gives them power over their peers and another that leads to their oppression. Isn't this amazing? So students were handed a chart that showed showing examples of dominant, quote unquote, identities, like being white, and subordinate identities. I bet you're going to guess what a subordinate identity is, like being black, and separated them by, quote, manifestations of social oppression, such as classism, racism, and heterosexism. So if you're a heterosexual white male, you're racist. You've obviously got a head up on the economy. This is absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I tell you the truth, man. If you're black, you should be offended by this. At what point are you going to get tired of white liberals calling you dumb? At what point? I mean, this drives me insane. Effectively, the chart shows that straight white Christian males are dominant over everyone else. So there's no way they can get away from it. Basically, the assignment is, hey, white people, hey, white males, admit that you're evil. Now, why is this important? This is important for two reasons. I want to show you a video of both Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu really quickly here. If I can pull these up, let's go to video clip. First, number 8. Let's go to number 8, please, Gabe. This is Donald Trump. He gave a special Christmas message that I absolutely loved. It was so refreshing. I want you to hear it. I'm going to tie it into this story. Let's roll it, please, Gabe.
It's my tremendous honor to finally wish America and the world a very Merry Christmas. For Christians, this is a holy season, the celebration of the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. More than 2,000 years ago, the angel Gabriel appeared to Mary. He said, "Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God." The angel told her that she would give birth to a baby boy, Jesus, who would be called the Son of the Most High. 9 months later, Christ was born in the town of Bethlehem. The Son of God came into the world in a humble stable Whatever our beliefs, we know that the birth of Jesus Christ and the story of this incredible life forever changed the course of human history. There's hardly an aspect of our lives today that his life has not touched. Art, music, culture, law, and our respect for the sacred dignity of every person everywhere in the world. At Christmas, we give thanks to God and that God sent his only Son to die for us and to offer everlasting peace to all humanity. And we recognize that the real spirit of Christmas is not what we have, it's about who we are. Each one of us is a child of God. That is the true source of joy this time of the year. That is what makes every Christmas merry. Above all, during the sacred season, our souls are full of thanks and praise for Almighty God for sending us Christ, his Son, to redeem the world. Tonight we ask that God will continue to bless this nation, and we pray that he will grant every American family a Christmas season full of joy, hope, and peace.
All right. So, man, isn't that refreshing to hear? Isn't that refreshing to hear? Now, I will say this. I don't believe that everyone is a child of God. I do believe that everyone is a creation of God. But when you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you do become a child of God because you're adopted into the family. But nonetheless, man, oh, this is so refreshing to hear after 4 years of this dementia patient in the White House that did everything possible, including his DOJ arresting pro-lifers and the such. Just absolutely insane. There's another video from Netanyahu, but I think what I'm going to do is do what I did on Prager, and basically I'm going to read it. I just want you to understand the power that Western civilization has had in the world, and not a power that is a power of influence for good. That's what Western civilization has been. Whether it's the United States of America, whether it is the nation of Israel. But Carl, slavery. Listen, slavery was worldwide and it ended here in the United States of America. You know, what we have is recency bias because it was abhorrent. It was absolutely evil. And I'm not minimizing it. I'm not excusing anything. But the reason that we know anything about it is because we kept records of it and we stopped it. Slaves were extremely valuable to their owners inside of the United States, as gruesome as that is and as evil as it is. But that is a fact. But I do know this as well, that we controlled about 3 to 4% of the slave trade, whereas the rest of the world controlled the majority of the slave trade, including Latin countries, African countries, Muslim countries. Oh, dare I say it, Native Americans. I mean, it's just absolutely insane to assume, oh, America is the only country in the world. We went and captured Africans with butterfly nets, like you saw on, what was that? I forget that show back in the day with Kunta Kinte. I mean, it's just absolute nuts. It's absolutely nuts. It's Democrats that are trying to revise history. But nonetheless, I want you to understand what's going on. Benjamin Netanyahu gave a and it's in Hebrew. I asked Gabe to upload this video, but I think the more that I think about it, I think I should just read what Benjamin Netanyahu warned as he lit the first candle of Hanukkah, starting that today. But here's what he said to the Houthis. He said, "Today we are lighting the first candle of Hanukkah to mark the victory of the Maccabees then, and also the victory of the Maccabees of today. Like them, we are striking at our enemies and those who thought they could cut the thread of our lives here. Then this will apply to them all. The Houthis will also learn what Hamas, Hezbollah, the Assad regime, and others have learned, and this will also take time. This lesson will be learned across the Middle East. I tell you, in those days, at this season, a happy holiday to you all." Netanyahu is back. Trump is back. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Western civilization is making a comeback. Western ideals are making a comeback because Western ideals based in Judeo-Christian heritage are good for the world. There's never been any country like the United States of America that has done more to make people free and prosperous and happy than any other country in the world, any other country that God has ever created. I don't care how miserable you think you are. You can move outside of the United States, and I guarantee you, unless you're rich like an Ellen DeGeneres that'll virtue signal and I'm moving to Europe where I can go buy a mansion there and sit on the hill and have people kiss my butt there too. Like what they do. It's all virtue signaling. But you move, you if you're in the middle class, you're in poverty, you move anywhere else, you will regret it. And quite frankly, so will Ellen DeGeneres if she moved in the Middle East or someplace, someplace like that outside of the Western hemisphere. I'd take them seriously if they moved outside of the Western hemisphere. Let them move to Saudi Arabia. You know what I'm saying? Let them move to Iraq. Let them move to places like that. But anyway, getting back to this, I'm tying in this Indiana University story because it's really important. Again, Indiana University is requiring students to detail how their privilege caused oppression over subordinate groups. And obviously it came down to basically if you're a Christian males, you're dominant over everyone else. Some students had to make up stuff because they found it just too difficult to participate in this. One student told the Free Beacon about having to make things up to complete the exercise. He said, I'm being punished doing an assignment for my identity as a person, and that's just crazy. I have to make something up, and I don't enjoy doing that, he says. It's very rich that in the class where we are supposed to be talking about identity and not suppressing identity, I'm forced to suppress my own identity. I have to suppress myself because I'm presumed to be some privileged, horrible human being that didn't grow up without food. And he says, that's insane to me. And this is how the assignment looked after identifying the subordinate and dominant groups that they belong to. Students were tasked with reflecting on their privileges, listing the groups they held dominance over, and exploring ways to reshape their relationships with subordinate groups. The instructions were as follows. You will gain insight into your experiences of identity in the U.S., including both advantages and disadvantages you have experienced related to these identities. Self-awareness of identity, as well as experiences of privilege and oppression, serve as the basis for understanding the complexity of identity and how you can address issues of oppression. All right, the class Understanding Diversity in a Pluralistic society fulfills Indiana University's social and historical studies, quote unquote, requirement. Other classes that suffice include, quote, ancient and medieval art and introduction to archaeology. The class, however, does not satisfy the diversity in the United States requirement for students enrolled in the College of Art Sciences. Classes that do fulfill the requirement include Black women in the diaspora, American ethnic diversity, and sexual diversity. Now, why is this important? I told you that when your child goes onto a college campus, not only is the left trying to indoctrinate them, brainwash them, anything that you may have taught them, any religious upbringing that they may have had, the left is going to try to wipe it out pretty quickly. They're going to try to recruit them into the Democrat Party, but they're doing something else. And I want you to get this. Again, there is a reason why, even if you're an atheist or an agnostic, there's a reason why America is so successful. It's because our country is built on the foundation of Judeo-Christian values, built on the foundation of objective truth. So what does the left have to do? They have to make the college campuses, they have to make their ideology the church. That's why they virtue signal. That's why everybody has a religion, whether it's climate change, whatever it may be. The left has to find a religion because everybody is going to worship something. And I'm convinced that even the left gets this. If you're not going to worship God, you're going to worship something. Why not worship climate change? Why not worship abortion and reproductive rights, which is really silly when you think about it. Let's use common sense. You're killing, you're not reproducing anything, but the left is big on language. But their goal is to undermine the church. They want to fundamentally transform America. How do you fundamentally transform America? You uproot its Judeo Christian heritage. Another thing that's happening here, notice where this is happening. This is Indiana University. Now, there has been some good news, and I forgot to share this on Prager, so you're hearing it for the first time on the podcast, but there is some good news on this. But not only are they undermining the church, their attempt is to undermine the Electoral College simultaneously. Carl, how is that possible? You're talking about college kids. Well, let me give you an example. Springfield, Missouri, a very small town, where it's a Bible Belt town, university. There's other universities there. Basically, all these kids come into these universities, not necessarily the Christian university, but even in Christian universities, you can believe this. But they'll come into these universities. They'll get woke in these universities. They'll live in these areas in the Midwest, in these Bible Belt towns and red conservative country, and ultimately they'll get involved in the local politics, so on, etc. And they'll just flip these towns blue. And ultimately, what happens is, over time, what's going to happen is all of these colleges are spread across different states, red states. If you're not paying attention to what's going on in these colleges, if you don't abolish DEI, if you don't cut federal funding from these colleges and universities, if they're not teaching our kids STEM and how to go out and find a real job, and maybe offering some tech classes or something like that, what's going to happen is these kids are going to grow up. They're going to populate these, maybe if they're not killing their babies, but at least they're going to move there themselves because they like the cost of living. So they're going to move into places like Indiana. Places that are red, places like Missouri, places like Springfield, Missouri. They're going to populate these areas, and eventually there's going to be enough of them to flip that state or to flip a certain town blue. And ultimately, this is going to impact the Electoral College. I am convinced that the left understands this. They want as many colleges and universities as possible to go woke, particularly colleges and universities in these red states. I think they are. I think this is part of their intention. And then you get these people to move into these areas, populate these areas. They flip these areas blue, and then all of a sudden you're losing the Electoral College. And I know the left wants to abolish the Electoral College, but you think they're just going to wait for an opportunity? No, the left is constantly marching. That's what's happening. I do want to share some good news. However, Colleen Rose is the course instructor. She didn't provide guidance on how students should complete the assignment if they do not identify with any subordinate groups. According to the student, she did, however, include an optional written note on a submission from allowing students to share concerns about the assignment. Rose, who, quote, has close to 20 years of leadership experience in higher education with Indiana University, close quote, also serves as the director of student engagement at the university's Center for Rural Engagement, where she, quote, leads student-based initiatives, according to her online bio. Rose did, however, encourage her students to avoid writing about traumatizing aspects of their identity. So in other words, she's implying, listen, there's some problems with your identity, and it may be traumatizing, but we can avoid it, at least for now. But here's the good news. Indiana did pass this year an anti-DEI law that was signed into law by the governor, Eric Holcomb. And the bill prohibits colleges from requiring diversity statements in hiring and admissions. It also mandates a formal complaint process for reporting faculty who do not foster intellectual diversity and free inquiry. This lady should be fired. She should be fired. And requires tenured faculty as well as those up for promotion to undergo a review every 5 years to ensure compliance. All right. A federal civil rights complaint was also filed against Indiana University that accuses the school of offering 19 race-based scholarships, potentially in violation of federal law. William Jacobson, the group's president, told the Bloomington Herald-Times that the, quote, pervasive discriminatory scholarship activity, close quote, reflects, quote, a systemic disregard with not only the U.S. Constitution and the Civil Rights Act, but also Indiana University's own rules, close quote. All right, so Indiana University and Rose did not respond to requests for comments, but it's good to know. I'm glad they've been put on notice. Because it's very, very important what's going on. Okay, it's very important what's going on there, and just so you understand, these people are sick puppies. They really are sick puppies, but I am convinced that not only are these colleges being used as indoctrination and recruitment centers, but it is actively their mission to undermine Judeo-Christian values, and it is actively their mission to populate the areas in which they reside, or these colleges are, particularly in red areas, and flip those towns blue, and ultimately flip states blue. And it's going to happen if Republicans don't get a hold of this, if they don't stop all this DEI, CRT crap absolutely everywhere. They have to defund I'm sorry, none of these universities should be getting federal funds. Let the state pay for it. Department of Education could go bye-bye. Department of Education isn't doing anything to make anybody smarter. We've gotten dumber since the Department of Education has been put in place. And then if Democrats are opposed to abolishing the Department of Education, just tell them it was a Republican that set it up, Richard Nixon, and then maybe they'll be willing to abolish it. Okay, last thing, real quickly. Biden's prisoners of conscience, talking about the 37 murderers that he commuted. He left 3 on federal death row inmates that he commuted. 3 of them for political expediency. We talked about this before. He did not commute the sentences of. And just as a reminder, those were, who were they? Robert Bowers, convicted for the 2008 mass shooting at a Pittsburgh synagogue. Dylan Roof, that was convicted for the 2015 mass shooting at the Black Church in Charleston, South Carolina, and Tsarnaev, Zokhar Tsarnaev, convicted of the 2013 bombing at the Boston Marathon. Now, all of these, what do they have in common? They all have political implications, and we've gone over that before. But there was a very fascinating article in the Wall Street Journal that I just want to cover real quickly. Biden's prisoners of conscience. So this column takes on a couple of these death row inmates and their stories, and I want you to. I'm warning you. These stories are gruesome, but we got to talk about them. All right, we got to let you know what happened. So starting here, Crystal Tobias, she was 9 years old. Laura Hobbs, she was 8 years old. They were riding their bikes in the Chicago suburb of Zion in 2005 when Jorge Avila Torres grabbed them, sexually assaulted the 9-year-old and the 8-year-old, and then he stabbed them to death. The innocent dad went to jail for it. So Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, found the bodies of the girls in a public park and was accused of their murder. He spent 5 years in prison pending a trial while Avila Torres remained at large. You know, the actual killer remained at large. In 2009, Avila Torres, who had by then joined the Marines, murdered 20-year-old fellow Marine Amanda Jean Snell. This, according to a statement from the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. He, quote, jumped on her as she slept in her bed, bound her wrist with the power cord from her laptop computer, and strangled her with the rest of the cord. Nice guy. He should die the same way. A federal jury sentenced Mr. Avila Torres to death, taking into account his prior convictions for having kidnapped 3 young women in Arlington, Virginia in 2010, one of whom he raped, sodomized, strangled, and left for dead. He later pleaded guilty to the murder of the young girls in Zion as well. Avila is just one of the 37 inmates that are receiving a commutation to life in prison by Joe Biden. Now, a caller called in earlier and made a good point. Is this life without parole, or is this life where these guys can get out? And from my understanding is it's life without parole. But it's a very good question, because even if it's life without parole, what if these people go even further? So what's the basis or the moral basis or a moral measurement? What moral measurement did Biden use to determine his conscience was morally superior to that of the jury, that of you and larger society, that of Congress? What makes Biden morally superior in order to that he feels like he has the authority to commute these sentences? Because first off, just getting the death sentence, it's not like it happens every day inside of the United States. It's a relatively rare occasion. I want you to ponder that. But also, I want to go on to the second murderer. This is Anthony Battle. He killed an Atlanta prison guard with a hammer while serving a life sentence for raping and killing his wife. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals described it in 1994. The correctional officer, DeAntonio Washington, was found lying on the floor of cell house C with blood spurting out of his head. quote unquote, Mr. Battle was found standing near a vending machine where he had hit the hammer that he used for the murder. So I mean, this is absolutely insane. So now that this guy is commuted, there's not going to be a prison guard that's safe. There's not going to be a prison guard that's safe. And here's something you have to understand about prison, especially when you're dealing with lifers like this. They already have nothing to lose, so they'll kill other inmates. And now you've just given them permission not only to kill prison guards, kill other inmates as long, I mean, while Biden is in, while lefties are in. Obviously, this is going to come to a screeching halt the moment that Trump is in. But this is essentially what has transpired. This is the permission that you've given murderers in federal prison right now. Hey, kill at will. Kill if you're already there for murder anyway. Why not murder a prison guard? You know what I mean? Why not build up your reputation behind bars? I mean, this is absolutely insane, and there's inconsistency here. Who wasn't spared? Biden left the death penalty on the table for those three killers that we mentioned before. Why? For political purposes. So it isn't a matter of morality, right? This is all political. Because if he was being consistent, and he really didn't believe in the death penalty, well, if you don't believe in the death penalty, take everyone off, commute everyone's sentence. No, but the truth is these killers they represented a broad range of crimes. And what Biden essentially wants to do, this was a very good point. Actually, Rich Lowry of National Review penned a column on this as well. It was in the New York Post, however, but he said support for the death penalty has been has been waning over the years. So this is a great way for death row opponents to change public opinion. And I'm quoting, quote, change public opinion when the pardon power can be twisted into a weapon to effectively vacate federal statutes. So here's what the left wants to do. The left never wants to get you involved. They're a bunch of authoritarians, if you will. So they don't want you to be a part of the decision-making process. So what do? If you see that the death penalty is losing support, all right, let's just pardon people. And then what do you do? You get these social justice warriors. Biden has appointed, he just surpassed the amount of judges that Trump did. I forget the exact number of the amount, but he just surpassed Trump's number of federal judges that he's put on the bench. So you send a message to these judges, hey, we're not doing this stuff. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Biden's commutations weren't discriminating. Lowy writes, they were meant to be sweeping, applying to almost everyone in a broad category of criminals. In other words, it doesn't matter what crime you commit, what category of crime you commit, no matter how gruesome the crime you commit, you should not receive the death penalty. And you have death penalty opponents out there. Yeah, I mean, I heard a guy today, well, we spend too much money. Why? Okay, then instead of spending so much money, why don't we work on cutting down the amount of appeals? Now, listen, I'll say this: if there's no DNA evidence, I don't believe that anybody should be sentenced to death without overwhelming, clarifying evidence. And I do not believe a lie detector test, eyewitness testimony, that is not enough. I'm sorry, because witnesses can be flimsy, and I don't believe lie detector tests. People are put in a stressful situation and the thing can read wrong. So I'm not talking about that old type of technology. There has to be DNA evidence. There has to be something connecting people to the scene. I'm okay with something connecting them to the scene in addition to eyewitness testimony. If the eyewitness testimony, especially now with people got cameras on their phones, you can record. Unfortunately, that people record way too much. More attacks in New York City. A couple of people one lady slashed in the throat, and she said what was just as disturbing, basically, I'm paraphrasing, as the crime itself, was the fact that no one stopped to help her while she was being stabbed. Someone tried to stab her to death, and apparently, I don't know if it was another passerby or what, but two people, but nobody stepped in to help. Just let a crazy nut job start stabbing a woman, and everybody in Grand Central Station, oh, this is New York City, the Big Apple. No, until they get law and order back in that city, I'm not going back. I went once. I was thinking of contemplating going again. I will not go back until they get new leadership and they clean up that freaking city and the crime. Just absolutely insane. But Again, Biden's commutations were meant to be sweeping. This is also a way, just to reiterate, for those that support ending the death penalty. This is a way for Biden to go in and say, let's just change public opinion. Basically, if you're the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world, you're saying you're not for the death penalty, you're going to disincentivize federal prosecutors and federal judges from sentencing people to the death penalty or trying people on death penalty cases. That's what they're aiming to do. They don't want you to have a say. All right. And they want chaos. So, and plus you think about this, given Biden's history, his family's criminal history, do you doubt that more commutations are coming? And more commutations are coming. And as a matter of fact, for those of you, I want you to check out my X account. I posted earlier this morning or last night, pictures that were recently released of Biden as the vice president of the United States meeting with Hunter Biden's Chinese business partners. Isn't it amazing how all this stuff is coming out? The left has been denying this for years, and now all of a sudden this stuff is being leaked. Isn't that amazing? Everything that we've said on the right, accusing Biden of being corrupt as all get out, is proving to be right. Now, Rich Lowry goes on to say, the goal wasn't to apply, and I'm quoting, case by case mercy, but to thwart a form of punishment sanctioned by the Constitution, specifically authorized by Congress and recommended and imposed by juries and judges. In other words, they want to flip the Constitution upside down. This isn't a matter of just being against the death penalty. This is a matter of being against the Constitution. Specifically, again, punishment that is sanctioned by the Constitution, specifically authorized by Congress and recommended and imposed by juries and judges. If they want to change a law, this needs to go through Congress. All right. So you can't have it both ways. Either the federal death penalty is morally abhorrent and shouldn't be used, or it isn't. So you shouldn't be pardoning or leaving 3 people on, leaving 3 inmates still that are on the table for the death penalty while you take 37 others off. It's hypocrisy at its best. All right. So Joe Biden's DOJ supports the death penalty when it comes to abortion on demand. Ironically, they support the death penalty when it comes to Luigi Mangione, because these are all political for them. This is all about politics. This is all about fundamentally undermining the United States of America and our Constitution. Guys, listen, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, please join me on all things social media, X, Instagram, and Facebook. Also, subscribe to my podcast, The Carl Jackson Show. And until next time, do not grow weary doing good. God bless you.